The funny thing about this is we have found ourselves being Braves fans, Braves observers, in a familiar situation. It was only last year around this time that Josh Donaldson signed to the Twins, and Braves fans were mortified at the idea of the bringer of rain being on another team, and we were questioning who was going to fill that gap. And it was also about the same time that we were scratching our heads at the Marcell Ozuna signing. I don't know if you remember this, but public opinion on Marcel Ozuna at the time was not very great. We saw some exciting moments with him in the postseason, of course, against the Cardinals that year. We knew what he could do, but we weren't sure if he had the potential to actually do it throughout a season. Of course, everything that happened last season, it led to a crazy situation within MLB, but Marcel Ozuna adapted perfectly to it. But a year later, Braves fans are questioning who will fill the gap of Marcel Ozuna, much like we questioned who would fill the gap of Josh Donaldson. The same question of if we'll re-sign him. Remember, because we were questioning whether or not we were going to re-sign Josh Donaldson too. Now we're wondering what we're going to do. Are we going to re-sign Marcel Ozuna? Are we just going to pull the trigger and spend the money and do that? Or are we going to go elsewhere? So I think we're in a different search than we were last year. I think last year we were looking for a replacement rather than the future in a lot of ways. And I think that might be different now. But we have a lot of unknown at the moment, because not only do we have an unknown left fielder right now, we really have an unknown center fielder. And I mean that with all due respect to Christian Pache and his defense. We've heard a lot about it, but we don't know what we're going to get out of Christian Pache day to day. I know a lot of you guys are going to bring up Drew Waters eventually throughout this chat, but we don't know what we're going to get out of either of those two guys, and if it's going to translate to the major leagues. We just don't know that yet. So there's a lot of unknown. And on a competing team looking for a World Series championship, it may not be a great move to have two-thirds of your outfield be, frankly, rookies, those being Drew Waters and Christian Pache. I'm not saying it's a terrible fix if that were to happen, but that is the worst-case scenario at the moment, is we bring up Drew Waters and we let Christian Pache have his year. That is the worst-case scenario if you're Braves fans. And it's really not that bad, but there is certainly a lot of benefit in adding a couple of short-term veteran options. So that brings me to the conversation we're going to have. The first guy we're going to talk about potentially signing with the Atlanta Braves, of course, it's going to be Marcell Ozuna. In 2020, you already know he had 60 games played, 77 hits, 56 RBIs, 18 homers, and a .338 average. He led the league in homers and in RBIs. So it is said at the moment that the Braves are unlikely to re-sign Marcell. And in my opinion, I've thought this from the get-go. If there is no National League DH, that may be for the best. It puts a bad taste in your mouth. Trust me, it put a bad taste in mine the first time I said it. But at the same time, it's true. If there's no DH, I don't know if he's the best thing for the Braves at the moment. And by the way, breaking news, Musgrove just went to the Padres. So the Padres are still adding to their depth. But there are others that can help fill the gap. I know everybody's concerned about the protection of Freddie. I think D'Arnaud for this year would be a great person to protect Freddie in that 4-hole if we don't get someone else. 3 or 4-hole, whichever way they design the lineup this year. But I think the Braves are betting on guys like D'Arnaud and Swanson to have continued success from 2020 into 2021. That's got to happen. But I think we're also missing the fact that we have Ozzy Albies back. And I know we got him back towards the end of the year last year, but we did not see him for a lot of those 60 games. And that felt almost like a huge free agent signing at the time. So we're expecting him to have a huge year this year. I think we have unseen potential in Austin Riley. And I know I talk about Austin Riley a lot. I'm going to talk about him in a few minutes. But the guy's got massive power. Hopefully he can find some consistency in his at-bats, potentially hit behind Freddie and D'Arnaud or amidst the upper part of the lineup, maybe even Swanson. There are a lot of guys that we've yet to see the best of, and I do believe that with a lot of these young Braves. So I will say this is not a knock or a criticism, but I do think it is fair to say that we didn't see a full year of Marcell. He was terrific in 2020, absolutely went off, but we did not see 162 games. I wonder what would have happened had we. I think that's a fair question. Would he have run out of steam? Because he was, heck, he had 2/3 of the Triple Crown last year. I don't think that would have lasted. I think someone would have outdone him eventually. But everything considered, I understand why the Braves aren't running back to Marcell Ozuna. I don't know that I would be rushing back to sign him. Not to mention, he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid very well this year. I think the Braves are exploring other options. And the front office, this is not the first time they've conducted themselves in this manner. They haven't even signed Freddie Freeman to an extension yet. They're probably budgeting it out and figuring out what they need to fix, what they need to get first. And I don't mind that at all. The number 2 option, the one that I've heard so much about. There's a couple here that you guys have probably heard and talked about with your friends, talked about it on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Number 2 is going to be George Springer. And this is in no particular order. I'm just basically spitting out what I've seen, what I've heard, and giving you my thoughts on them. But number 2 is George Springer. In 2020, he had 51 games played, 50 hits, 32 RBIs, 14 homers, and a 265 average. Not the same numbers Ozuna put up, but none of these guys are going to be the same numbers Ozuna put up. He had a monster season last year. To expect somebody to come in and repeat that would be a bit unfair. But this is a guy that has been linked to the Braves in the talks that we've seen everywhere. And he is a free agent. And though he didn't have the same numbers as Ozuna, he carried a disenfranchised Astros team. And I don't know if you guys watched him last postseason. And with those players and that organization struggling around him, he carried himself in the best way possible, considering the circumstances. And he managed to play through it. And really, I think that's respectable. Obviously, I don't like at all what the Astros did. We've talked about that before. I don't really want to bring it up again. But I think we'd have some backlash amongst the Braves fans, calling him a cheater and things like that. But I think with that negativity on the 2017 Astros team, he's ready to get out of Houston, put it in the past, and move to a competing team. I think Atlanta is a destination spot. I think this could happen. Now, he has come out and said that he wants to go somewhere near Connecticut. Crazier things have happened. People have put that aside before. It may be a one-year deal, but I think the Braves could do this. But if I had to lean a certain way, I think this is a little bit too high profile for Alex Anthopoulos. I think he's a little bit more under the radar, which leads me to the next guy, Jock Peterson. 2020, Jock Peterson had 43 games played, 23 hits, 16 RBIs, 7 homers, and he only had a 190 average. Now, I've heard a lot about Jock recently. I've done a lot of research on this. I didn't just look at last year's stats. I know that's unfair. But this is a name that has been dropped in my comments section a ton. And I really had to take a look at it before I definitely gave you an answer. I think this is definitely a possibility. He is a free agent right now, and he's there to be picked up, so you don't have to go through the Dodgers. You just have to pick him up off free agency. The only thing that makes me worried is that big-time drop-off last year. Obviously not the numbers he was looking for. He only played in 43 games, batting below the Mendoza line. So if you go back to 2019, the numbers are a lot better, and I think that's a much better representation of who Jock is. 36 homers, 249 average. That's good enough for a lot of people. I don't know if it's what the Braves are going to look for, but if it happened, it would not be the first time that the Braves look to someone to have a bounce-back year. Josh Donaldson is a perfect example. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember vividly the videos of Donaldson out there working on the hit machine with Kevin Seitzer and figuring it out. And then he ended up popping off at the seams. I think the Braves could be that destination for Jock Peterson, and I think it could help the Braves out with their current situation. I think it's a potential move. I don't know that we'll be able to look at the move with a fair look until the end of the season, just because of we don't know what we're going to get. We don't really know what to expect if we were to sign Jock Peterson. But I think it's a potential move. The Braves have looked to this idea of postseason experience. And frankly, in recent years, nobody has more postseason experience than the Dodgers. Jock Peterson has been a big part of that. And Jock, I'm gonna read off some of his postseason stats in a minute. And I don't know if you realize how significant it really is. I'm gonna do it in a second, but realize the Braves signed Pablo Sandoval this year, gave him a postseason roster spot specifically because he'd been to the postseason before. So that's how much they value postseason experience. Last year in the postseason, through 10 at-bats, he batted .400. He had 3 RBIs plus a homer. In his career, Jock Peterson has 9 postseason homers, 272 average, and a 349 on-base percentage. Simply put, the guy is a playmaker, and this could be just under the radar enough to be Alex Anthopoulos' style. and he could pull the trigger and bring him to Atlanta. It has certainly been speculated on recently, and I think it is certainly a move. So let's move on. Number 4 is going to be Michael Brantley. This is a guy who's under the radar that I think potentially could get picked up, whether he be a starting left fielder or a bench bat. Probably starting left fielder, I would assume. He had 46 games played last year, 51 hits, 22 RBIs, 5 homers, and a 300 average. Now, the homers were nothing to write home about, but Michael Brantley would be a solid pickup for any team. Obviously, we just talked about George Springer and him wanting to leave Houston. Michael Brantley's got to be in the same boat. He's a 4-time All-Star as recent as 2019, and he's a 12-year veteran, all the experience he needs. He's only 33 years old, though. He is a formidable outfielder. At the plate, his career numbers are respectable and could provide some protection behind Freddie or behind d'Arnaud, much like we talked about Riley earlier. If Atlanta decides that it is the better option to bring him in, it'll be very interesting. I think that this is something that could happen, similar to Jock. I think they're in the same boat in terms of being under the radar and right where the Braves would want to be. And this fits into that Anthopoulos method of not spending too much and getting the desired results. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it could. Number 5, this is a guy who I still don't understand why we didn't bring back, Adam Duvall. I threw him in here because I thought he should be in here. 2020, 57 games played, 45 hits, you know the numbers, 33 RBIs, 16 homers, right there with Ozuna in homers, and a 237 average. Now, the average dropped off. He was a little bit streaky, but there's no doubt Adam Duvall exceeded all expectations last year. This is a guy that I was so surprised the Braves let loose because they had him on arbitration. They could have got him for a good price. I was very surprised. I thought for sure he'd be back. With that said, the only thing I can think of is that the Braves mutually agreed to let him test free agency. Because why would you not want to add this guy to your team, even in a bench role, potentially, if you got him there? If we're worried whether or not the DH will be in the National League, Adam Duvall is the perfect stand-in at left field. So I really question that at the moment. I still don't understand it. I don't know that I ever will. But it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Duvall added to the roster if the Braves get too close to spring training or the regular season without a veteran stand-in. Another reason it wouldn't surprise me is because, frankly, Duvall had a career resurgence in Atlanta. He quietly made his way up through the minor league system. He had a heck of a time doing that, and we all remember seeing the pictures with him and Gwinnett and wondering what he was going to be if he'd ever turn it around, and then he did, and he became one of the most feared hitters in the lineup. So even if he isn't what he was in 2020, he could in theory split time with these other options that are about to pop up in a minute. But Adam Duvall, like I said, exceeded all expectation last year. Nobody expected him to have the year he did. He worked hard. He kept up with Marcell Ozuna in the home run race all the way to the end, only missing it by 2. Some criticized him last year, and I thought it was a bit unfair. They criticized him for being a bit streaky. And a lot of fans wonder what could have been had he been there in the postseason. I know I do. Obviously, that injury kept him out, and that's a shame. But I think he's a guy that has earned a spot. That brings me to number 6. This is a name that came out today. I don't know how much I view it. I don't know how much I really think about it. Brett Gardner, obviously, veteran player, Yankees. 2020, 49 games played. He's a workhorse. 29 hits, 15 RBIs, 5 homers, and a 223 average. Now, this popped up on my Facebook timeline today in an article or two. I'm sure some of you saw it. And the idea intrigued me. I've always liked the way Gardner plays the game. I've always said a Pete Rose style, just plays very hard. The hustle, the deep at-bats, just playing really hard. Good fielder. And that's something that's a novelty in today's game. The idea of just playing hard, hustling. It's a bit overlooked. And I've always liked it about him. I've always liked that style. And he is the quintessential leadoff man. With that said, I don't think that's what the Braves are looking for. He's a great player, but if I'm making the call, I need someone with some pop that can make things happen day in, day out. Especially with Ozuna leaving. We needed that with Donaldson leaving, and we need it now. So that's where I'm at with Brett Gardner. I don't know if that's what you guys think, but that's kind of where I'm at with Brett Gardner. I had some people text me today wondering what I thought about it. That leads me to the number 7 guy, and this is a guy who some of you guys are going to groan about. Some of you guys are going to be like, yeah, he said it. Johan Camargo. In 2020, Johan Camargo had 35 games played, 24 hits, 9 RBIs, 4 homers, and a 200 average. He struggled a little bit, but Johan is a guy who I've always thought is too good at too many things. And it's a little bit unfortunate. He's an infielder by trade. He battled for third base over the past couple of years with Austin Riley. And ultimately, the Braves stuck with Riley. But I think Johan could start for a lot of teams in a lot of positions. And that's the unfortunate thing about him, because when you get a guy like that, you want to use him as a utility. And these past couple of years, especially this past year, that hasn't been seen. You know, the pinch hits, we didn't see any of that hardly last year. And that's unfortunate, because I think that was a contributing cause as to why Charlie Culberson went to Texas, is because he didn't get that time. Who's to say what would have happened this year? But I think the same situation happened with Johan. Johan is a guy that is respected enough at the plate to throw in the lineup at any given time. He's arbitration eligible this season. He's a free agent 2024. He's on the Braves roster. That's why he's in this list. He is on the Braves roster. I think he is one of many guys that can split time in left field, and he gives the Braves a lot of options. But there's been a lot of talk about Riley making that transition to left field. But I think that Johan moving to left field could be revisited and discussed too. I think he is so versatile, and it makes him easy to put that utility label on. But he is a different hitter when he plays every day. I think we can all agree when he plays every day and he's starting, he is a much better hitter, as anybody would, seeing live baseball every day. Anybody would be. I think this is certainly, at minimal, a viable backup option if a 5-star pickup doesn't happen. But that's what I think about Johan. Number 6, similar to Johan, we're going Nick Marchakis. Now, Nick Marchakis is a free agent, but in 2020, 37 games played, 33 hits, 15 RBIs, 1 homer, and a 254 average. Nick Marchakis has found a way to remain on a team that is constantly growing, getting unlimited new talent, and, frankly, moving toward that younger generation. And through years of taking 1-year contracts for minimal money, it's a wonder how he hasn't moved somewhere with potential more playing time. And at 37 years old, with not much time left in his career, he sits 712 hits away from 3,000. And without a doubt, that mark is on his mind every time he steps up to the plate, every time he signs a new deal. If he is to return to the Braves, I think it would most likely be in a bench role, splitting time, and I think he'd be a perfect fit for that. And it makes me wonder whether or not they'll do it. He has been more to the Braves than I think they ever expected, stayed longer than they ever expected. He's a Georgia native, and it is doubtful he'll want to go play anywhere else. I think once his time is done with the Braves, that'll be it, unless he goes back to Baltimore again, potentially. I really think after he's done with the Braves, it's going to be it. But I think this could go a lot of ways. The best way I think this could go is that both parties go another year for minimal cash like they've done before, and let him have some pinch hit opportunities and a start here and there. That is the best thing I see out of Nick Marchakis. Couple more guys, and then we're going to be done with this list. Let me know so far what you think in the comment section. Comments always help me out in getting this stuff out there. And, of course, tell your friends about this channel. Subscribe to this channel if you're watching this and you're new. I do appreciate it. So, number 7, Ender Inciarte. Ender is... I have to talk about Ender. I'd be ignorant not to talk about Ender as a left field replacement. He's signed through next year. Last year he had 46 games played, 22 hits, 10 RBIs, 1 homer, and a 190 average. It is no secret that I thought Ender would have been a part of some trade by now. He's a valuable outfielder, and that's frankly why I thought he'd be a part of a trade. Defensively, there are very few people I would choose in front of him. On the Braves roster in the past 5 years, there are very few people. Three gold gloves that speak for themselves, but his bat is just not valuable in the lineup. With players like him in today's age, I wish there was a designated fielder, but there's just not. I highly doubt that he will be a starter. I think he could have split time, and I think that's the most likely role for him at this point, off the bench. And that's not a new radical opinion. I'm not telling you something you don't know, but that's what I see out of Ender. And I know he's a fan favorite. He's had some great moments and a good year or two, but he's just not there right now. I don't know that he'll ever be there again, and he's certainly not going to put up the numbers that Marcell Ozuna put, but he could split time. That is an option there. The last one I'm going to talk about is Drew Waters. Again, worst case scenario, and it's a lot better than a lot of other teams' worst case scenario. There's the only reason this is even remotely a bad thing is because we don't know a lot. We saw Christian Pache last year. We saw moments from him. He had a postseason homer. He did a lot of good things in a short amount of time. But with Drew Waters, you're going to have to trust the Braves organization. And that's something that the fans don't particularly like to do in this role. You have to trust them, and they have to trust themselves. If that happens, if they believe he's ready, maybe he is the guy. But if he hits a point where he is struggling, patience is key.